For the past couple of years, it almost feels like the MVP race is pretty much the exact same season over season, having Jokic, Giannis, Luka, Embiid, and SGA usually ending up as the top 5, with either Tatum or Sabonis making a push if one or more of those guys doesn't meet the game's requirement. Well, those 7 guys will most likely once again be in the running. There are a couple of other players that definitely seem like they could creep up from the shadows and snag up that award going into this season. Starting off with a player who's starting to garner hype we haven't seen in decades, Anthony Edwards. Entering the league as the #1 pick in the 2020 draft, the potential that was expected from Ant showed up early, already averaging 19 points in his rookie season. But still being a rookie, there was a lot left to be desired in his game. His offense wasn't the most efficient, actually finishing that season with a negative offensive win share. Going into his sophomore season, once again the growth was there, but his game essentially stayed the same. However, in his 3rd season, everything would change. Up until this point, the T-Wolves were slowly and quietly putting together a pretty well-rounded squad. But for the front office, they still felt like they were one piece away, so they threw everything and the kitchen sink toward the Utah Jazz to get Rudy Gobert. At the time, considering everything they gave up, this seemed like an overpay. Even now with hindsight, it is still a pretty hefty trade, but it would start paying dividends, just not right away. During Rudy's first year with the team, they finished with a disappointing 42-40 record. However, Cat only played 29 games, with Rudy and Nas also missing a few games as well. But either way, this still felt a little underwhelming considering what the franchise gave up. Personally, for Anthony Edwards, this season was somewhat of a success, making his first All-Star appearance while averaging 24, 6, and 4 with 1.5 steals a game. But again, with the team finishing as the 8th seed before getting bounced in the first round by the Denver Nuggets, I doubt that Ant felt very good after this season. And going into next year, it would become his mission to make the league feel that same struggle. The Timberwolves came out hot, going 8-2 through their first 10 games, and heading into the new year almost 2 months later, they would only tack on 5 more losses, being at 24-7 and the 1st seed in the West at the time. Their dominance didn't waver over that season whatsoever, and they actually ended up finishing out the year as the 3rd seed in the West. And Anthony Edwards' ascension was a massive reason why. During Rudy's first season, many people figured it was just a bad overall fit. But the truth is that the rest of the team just wasn't caught up to the vision that the front office had. And that vision truly came to life when Ant took a massive step in his defense last year. Something that this franchise relied on heavily across the entire team during their run, and it paid off as they were undeniably the best defensive team in the league last year, being one of the few teams that actually figured out how to make Jokic look partially human. For 2 games until the big guys slowly started to figure them out. But nevertheless, the major jump in the team's defense from 2022 to last year was very promising, and those strides mostly came from both Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, who had the most notable leaps. Going into the playoffs, they would get their revenge against the Denver Nuggets for knocking them out in the first round the year prior. But unfortunately, they would run into a wall in the conference finals when going up against the Dallas Mavericks. But for Ant, despite the team falling short in the conference finals, his summer wasn't over. Not before long, he was on a plane heading over to Paris. And this trip across the pond could turn out to be one of the most crucial development moments for his entire career. It's a theory that we had on this channel around the same time last year that Anthony Edwards' summer playing FIBA ball while getting some experience under coach Steve Kerr would completely change his game and help make him a candidate for an early MVP push. And considering that he finished 7th in voting for that award, I'd say it was a pretty good show. So if FIBA had that much of an effect on him, how would playing that same style of ball but alongside bona fide legends like LeBron, Steph, and KD affect his career? We've seen this exact same example from LeBron himself after 2008, even talking about how that experience with Kobe was a massive help to his game and overall mentality. Well, if you watched any of the games and any of the footage coming out behind the scenes, you'd be quick to notice Anthony Edwards always in the mix like a sponge, gaining that experience. So this truly could be the year that the era of Ant begins.
To me, he's an all-star, but not a superstar yet. Buddy.
Now looking at another player who was in the midst of a league takeover before slightly derailing their own career. and that player, of course, would be Ja Morant. After spending last year on the sidelines due to a suspension and an injury immediately following his return from that suspension, Ja Morant, by all appearances, seems to be fired up and ready to come back and remind the league about the player that everyone has forgotten. Before everything occurred with Ja off the court, he was quickly becoming one of the most influential players on the game and the culture of basketball since Allen Iverson. But his suspension and boneheaded moves would slowly start to make Ja fade from relevancy. But it's important to remember that Ja's initial hype didn't begin with his impact off the court. It was all about his play on the court. And once the season gets underway, that play will once again speak for him and remind everyone exactly how and why Ja Morant started to create so much buzz. For about half a decade before Ja's arrival in Memphis, the Grizzlies were underwhelming to say the least, and their record leading up and during Ja's rookie season reflected that fact. This roster stunk of rebuild, with rookie Ja Morant actually leading the team in scoring and assists for that season. However, after his promising rookie campaign while snatching up the Rookie of the Year award, the following season, on some parts, was seen as a step backwards, with his shooting splits taking a pretty hard dip compared to his rookie season, which kinda seemed like a problem considering shooting was the one area that NBA scouts saw as a potential issue. But thankfully, his high IQ for the game helped come into play and he was able to help distribute the ball whenever his shots weren't falling. And now with another promising rookie in Desmond Bane, as well as Jaren Jackson Jr. continuing to take strides in the right direction, this helped the Grizzlies finish that season with a slightly better record. And that better record translated into the first taste of postseason play for many of the players on the roster, including Ja Morant. And although he may have struggled with his scoring and efficiency during the regular season, once he hit the court in the playoffs, he turned into a completely different animal. Ja went from averaging 19, 4, and 7 on 44% to 31, 5, and 8 on 48% shooting from the field. And this glimpse of clutch dominance in the postseason was only a taste for what would be in store for Ja Morant going forward. His third season in the league, like many others before him, would be the breakout year, getting named as an All-Star while also making the All-NBA second team. His game would also slightly shift during this year as well, putting more emphasis on scoring and less on distributing, while also putting in a really solid effort toward working on his defense, stacking up more steals per game while also seeing a pretty decent bump in his defensive win shares. And with all of that progression from Ja and the rest of the squad, the team ended up finishing as the second seed in the West. And once again, Ja Morant would put on a clinic during their playoff run, averaging 27, 8, and 10. And if it weren't for a play where Jordan Poole accidentally, or not, pulling on Ja's knee, extending it in a weird way, causing Ja to miss the next 3 games, he might have been able to add on to that amazing playoff resume. But without him, the Grizzlies unfortunately got knocked 3 games later. And sadly, the following season is where everything started to go wrong for Ja. We've already done a video on everything that happened during that season and over the summer that you can check out up here if you want to hear about it. But basically, through all of the pretty dumb decisions Ja was making that season, it turned into a wash. And as we mentioned, last year wasn't much better, with Ja Morant returning from his suspension to only play 9 games, then suffer another injury and become sidelined once again. So naturally, with all of his talent, the main thing that could hold him back from entering the MVP race would be his health. Something that you can't really even avoid now with the 65 game requirement in order to even qualify for the award. And for Ja, a 65 game season is something he hasn't been able to do since his rookie year, which he only played 67 games. With the fearless, high-flying athleticism that some people have compared to Derrick Rose, there's very few opportunities that Ja Morant will give up to throw down on someone's head. And although it has made for some pretty crazy highlights, his fearless drives to the rim have backfired at times. And if he's not careful, then eventually he's not going to get so lucky, and one of those minor injuries he stacks up on those drives could turn into something more serious. However, if he can stay healthy and focused on the game, then there's little doubt that Ja Morant will be up there at the top hunting down that MVP award.
The next player to make the list is Jaylen Brunson. Brunson's emergence as a legitimate star in New York has become one of the more exciting stories in the NBA. After joining the Knicks in the 2022 offseason, many saw him as a solid point guard who could offer scoring and playmaking, but not necessarily as a franchise player. Fast forward to the 2024 postseason, and Brunson has shattered expectations, proving to be the engine that drives the Knicks. His phenomenal playoff run, where he averaged 32.5 points per game and had a thrilling 7-game series against the Indiana Pacers, was a testament to his skill and ability to rise to the occasion under pressure. Night after night, Brunson put the team on his back, delivering clutch performances and showcasing an elite combination of scoring, leadership, and playmaking. The Knicks have responded by doubling down on their aspirations, swinging for the fences by acquiring both Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. These moves signal that New York is no longer content with just being a playoff team. They want to contend for a title. With the revamped roster, the Knicks are now one of the most talented teams in the Eastern Conference and look poised to make a serious leap towards the top. These acquisitions should theoretically make the Knicks better, but they also create a new dynamic where Brunson will have to share the offensive load. For Brunson, the situation presents both an opportunity and a challenge. On one hand, having talented teammates like Towns and Bridges should take some of the pressure off of him, potentially allowing him to operate more efficiently and focus on making the right play rather than always having to carry the scoring burden. This could also open up more space for him to work, as defenses will no longer be able to key in on just him. However, the presence of the other high-usage players also means that Brunson's role as the primary offensive option could be diminished. As the new pecking order establishes itself, Brunson will need to maintain the same level of aggressiveness and production to stay in MVP contention. Beyond just scoring, Brunson's ability to facilitate and keep everyone engaged will be critical. As the floor general, he'll need to find ways to integrate Towns and Bridges while still asserting himself as the team's leader. This requires not just skill, but basketball IQ and maturity to understand when to take over and when to defer. If he can successfully navigate these challenges while maintaining the efficiency and clutch play he's become known for, the Knicks could soar to a top seed in the East. In the MVP race, narrative plays a big role, and Brunson is in a unique position where a strong season would resonate with voters. After all, taking a franchise like the Knicks, one of the league's most storied yet underperforming teams in recent decades, from mediocrity to potential contenders, would be seen as a monumental achievement. Ultimately, Jaylen Brunson's MVP candidacy hinges on his ability to balance his individual dominance with team success in this new era for the Knicks. Should he manage to rise to the occasion and thrive with this newly formed team, Brunson will not only solidify himself as a dark horse MVP contender, but as one of the best guards in the entire league. The last player on this list is one that we have to mention, given that his team was the one to send the Knicks home during Brunson's rampage. Tyrese Haliburton has emerged as one of the NBA's brightest young stars. As the centerpiece of a deep playoff run that saw the Pacers reach the Eastern Conference Finals, Haliburton's playmaking and leadership were central to the team's success. Despite all the excitement though, Haliburton's individual performance fell short of his regular season standards. While his regular season averages of 20 points and 11 assists per game were stellar, he struggled to maintain that production consistently in the postseason. However, this slight postseason dip shouldn't overshadow the fact that Haliburton is primed to take another leap in his development. The Pacers have positioned him as the face of their franchise, and Haliburton's role as the #1 option is unquestioned. Even with the addition of Pascal Siakam, who was a significant contributor during the 2024 playoffs, there's no doubt that this is Haliburton's team. Looking ahead, the Pacers are poised to be a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference. With more time for Haliburton, Siakam, and the rest of the team to build chemistry, Indiana could be a team that climbs into one of the top seeds next season. For Haliburton, this season presents an enormous opportunity. The pieces around him are solid, but it's going to be on him to elevate the team to true contender status. If the Pacers can secure a top 2 seed, Haliburton's MVP candidacy becomes more than just a long shot. He could be a legitimate contender. What makes Haliburton's case for MVP so intriguing is not just his numbers, but the context. In a league where narratives matter just as much as stats, guiding a team like the Pacers, which hasn't been a serious contender in recent years, to the top of the standings would be seen as a huge achievement. For him to be in the MVP conversation, however, consistency will be key. Haliburton will need to not only maintain his impressive averages, but also elevate them, and make clutch plays down the stretch in important games. The Pacers' success will rest largely on his shoulders and his ability to perform under pressure, especially after learning from his postseason struggles will be the determining factor in both his personal and the team's success. Ultimately, Tyrese Haliburton's MVP case will come down to how far he can push himself and his team. If everything clicks and the Pacers mesh into a top-tier team, Haliburton's blend of leadership, vision, and skill could very well land him in the MVP race. There we have it for the list. Do you think we missed anyone? Do you think we're idiots? Let us know in the comments. Or if you enjoyed watching the video and you made it this far, consider dropping a like or maybe even subscribing. We really appreciate everything, and we'll see you next video.